Hey guys, Gauthier here and welcome back to Stormworks. What I want to do today in Stormworks is build a new helicopter. We've built the Little Bird, we've built the Chinook. Both of these helicopters worked alright, but I want to go further with automation and altitude hold and make sure I have a helicopter which is capable of transporting more than one actual player. So I'm going to have another player who's capable of managing the other controls. This is probably going to be a pretty long build. I already have the Little Bird, but I want to do something a little bigger. Because at some point I might need a helicopter which is capable of transporting up to 10 people. Now, the other helicopter that I built comes to mind. The Big Bird. And I think that the Big Bird would actually be a helicopter capable of doing most of the things that I want it to do. So I'm going to use this as a base frame, and I'm going to adjust it quite a bit. Now, the things that I have researched recently are fuel tanks. Or fuel pumps rather, so I can now have a fuel spawner, and with that I can build a custom fuel tank, which I'm going to do in this episode. I also got an altimeter, and that's going to be very handy to make sure that this thing holds its actual altitude. And I got some basic mechanical parts. Let's see, here we are. Robotic pivots, a couple of fluids, we got the linear track base, linear track extension. These things are going to be helpful if I want to build stuff like a winch, for example, somewhere in here. Now, the way that the helicopter currently is set up is that it has this ginormous fuel tank, or rather 8 fuel tanks per side, and I want to be making that quite a bit more efficient. So I'm going to be going for the Big Bird Mark II. And we're just going to start tearing out parts of this helicopter. I always make a separate save of a unit to make sure that I have some place to get back to should something fail. And this also allows you to see a sort of evolution of your units, if you will. See how they've changed, see how they've been adjusted as you have been playing the game. Now this point down here is the winch, I think. Yep, that's the Actually, is it? Oh, no, never mind. This is an angle block. And this is where the fuel came up from the roof. Which is not bad, but I don't need that anymore. This one, I believe, is the fuel adder. So this one adds up all the different fuel ports. I don't need that anymore either. So I'm going to remove this stuff over here. For some reason, the game is really quite slow today. I'm going to change this to have a standard normal hull, and up here this is where the fuel is going, I believe, because we had the engine up here and the engine up here, so I need to have my fuel tank somewhere that it can be reached. Now if I have an height of 7 blocks, so this high, I can have enough height to walk around in this helicopter. That is definitely part of what I want. So what I'm going to do is build my fuel tank up here, mostly. Let's switch it back to symmetry mode. And I just wonder how much fuel I'm going to be able to stash in there. But it's pretty much going to be the whole top side of the helo. I will, however, have to close up these sections, making sure that I don't accidentally have a leak. Let's see, there's another, I think that's an angle block, or that rather that's what that needs to be. There. I don't need this anymore. This is part of the original fuel line. Just clear that fuel line out first. And this is also part of the original fuel line. Where did that come out of? I think just here. And it went off to the side. Went off towards the middle. And this should be the fuel port. Yep. Okay, that's good. Because that means that I can suck fuel directly from over here. And I can do the same thing here. So that's the fuel side. Fuel port goes over here. Now I can close up the engine compartments, making sure that there's no leak. Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, now you could argue, hey, you're building a helicopter and you put your fuel on the top of the helicopter. Doesn't that make it top heavy? Yes, it might. It very well might. So I'm gonna have to try and see how this thing handles the added load of fuel, or the added weight to the top of the helo. It might really not like it. It might really despise the additional weight, or the additional weight that it has over here. So we're just gonna have to see how much the helicopter can tolerate that. I still have 7 blocks. Sorry, not 7 blocks. Yeah, 7 blocks over here. So I got 175. That's the height of your character. So I can still walk around here. And now I have a pretty decent cargo space back here, which I can use for seating, but also, for example, for a winch that I lower through the bottom of the helicopter. First though, I'm going to need to set up a couple of systems to see if this thing will actually fly. I'm going to go with a fluid spawner. A fluid spawner spawns in fluid if you're not using the fuel extension for the game, or the fuel setting, where you need to manually refuel. And the other one that I want is a fluid meter. And this one's going to tell me exactly how much is left in the tank. The fluid level is going to go to my display, which says, hey, this is how much fuel you have. Let's see, fuel. There we go. I'm just going to spawn it in, because I want to see how much fuel actually spawns into the helicopter. Currently that's 2,475 liters. Okay. Where are you? Here. So I'm going to change this to 2475, because that's the maximum number of fuel, or maximum amount of fuel that it can actually have. Then, something else that I wanted to change, and that was pointed out to me by a subscriber, or by a viewer rather. What I have it set up as right now is if I sit down, then I want you to toggle the gyro. So what happens in the last couple of episodes is that at some point I leave my seat and I wonder why the helicopter goes all haywire. This is why. Because the gyro is no longer being controlled. So what I need to do is make sure that this thing is set up to a different button. For that I'm going to develop a microcontroller, because I also want to have an automatic altitude hold. We're going to need a couple of things. We're going to need at least one output. This is to always... let's see, the gyro constant on. This thing is just going to be an output. What I also need is a number input. This is going to be the current altitude. So this goes to the altimeter, which I don't actually have in the aircraft yet, but that'll come. Then we have another number, which is going to be a number output. And this is going to go to the throttle, to tell the throttle how much or how little it actually needs to do. Let's try to make this thing as small as possible. That should do it. Okay, so here we go. I got a constant on signal. And this one is going to go directly to the gyro. So now I don't have to be sitting down anymore when I place down this microcontroller. Next, I want a PID. And a PID controller, you could compare it at some way to the, let's say the cruise control in a car. Cruise control in your car is going to say, hey, I want you to have, or I want you to hold this particular speed. And a PID controller then checks what is my current speed. And that is the process variable, which is a really fancy word of saying what's coming in from the sensor. And the sensor is the current altimeter, or the current altitude. The set point is how much you want. So in the cruise control of your car, this would be how fast do you want to be going. And that is going to be another input that I need to make. So this is going to be a number input, and this is going to tell me the desired altitude. I'm going to have to make it one block wider, otherwise the game won't like me very much. This is going to go in here. And then the PID controller is going to say, okay, if that's true, then I need you to have this much throttle. This thing does not always need to be on, because sometimes I just want to define my own altitude. I might be going up, I might be going down, whatever it is. So I'm going to need a toggle on off. And this is going to toggle the altitude hold. We're going to make that one wider. This thing is going to go here. This is just a whole separate signal. It doesn't actually do anything. It does not interact with the PID. Now the PID gives you 3 separate sections: proportional, integral, and derivative. Really fancy words. What they basically mean is proportional, how hard do you want the helicopter to correct? So let's say your altitude is 50 and the desired altitude is 100. How fast do you want this thing to throttle up? I'm just going to start with 1. Integral gain is how much error is acceptable. So let's say you want an altitude of 100. Would an altitude of 75 also be acceptable? Then this would be 25. I don't want any variation in my altitude, so I'm going to set integral to 0. Derivative gain is how long do you want to wait to reach the set point? So your desired altitude in this case, or in case of your cruise control, how long do you want to wait until your car reaches that particular speed? The derivative gain is going to be, for me, not very much, because I don't want to wait too long. I want this thing to constantly keep checking whether it's at the right altitude. Okay, so with the 0.1, I don't have to wait too long for the helicopter to keep checking, am I at the right altitude, and how long do I want to wait to get there? Now there is one other thing that I need to check, and I need to make this thing a little bit more complex. This is the base way that you have a PID controller with a collective, because I realized that it should be collective, not throttle. It should be the pitch of the rotor blades, not the throttle of the engine that I want to be adjusting. But sometimes I want to be controlling the collective manually when this whole circus is not active. So what I'm going to need to do is add a switch box. There's going to be a numerical switch box, and it's going to sit between this thing, so between the PID and the collective. This is how that's going to work. If this whole system is active, and for that I'm going to need an input. This input is going to tell me, hey, is this whole circus active, yes or no? So this is going to be the, actually I already have that, come to think of it, toggle altitude hold. That would be this one. So I can remove that toggle there. If this is active, then I want you to control it from the PID. So if this numerical switch box is on, receives this on signal, then I want you to use the input that you get from the PID. Otherwise, it should just be the collective. So I need to have one more, and that's going to be an input for a number. That's going to be the collective, which is something I think, currently controlling from my seat. Here's the collective, and I'm going to send this thing here. Now I can space it out a little bit to make it maybe a little bit easier to see what's going on. Yeah, it sort of fits. Okay, summary. I toggle my altitude hold signal. I then also input what do I want to be my altitude. The PID controller is then going to consider, am I active? Yes or no. If I actually put the button that I still have to make in the cockpit on, then it's going to go, yep, I'm going to send this output towards the numerical switch box. And the numerical switch box is going to say, hey, am I on? Yep, I'm on, because I just got this toggle signal. So then, since I am on, I'm now going to use the switched value, which is coming in from the PID. So the PID is going to control my collective, so the pitch of the rotor blades. If all of this is not on, so if I haven't actually toggled my altitude hold, then the game is going to say, okay, then just take the standard collective input. That is all that you need to do. And then you need to just send that signal towards the collective. So then this numerical switch box basically doesn't do anything. Now with that I can save it. I already saved a backup for it, the helo altitude hold and gyro. And I can now add this to my helicopter. I'm going to put this thing in the back. I might have to use the back for a couple more microcontrollers. Now it's time to hook these things up. It looks like a whole bunch of connectors, but it's really not that complex since we built this thing ourselves. Gyro constant on goes to the gyro. Next up, we have the current altitude coming in from the altimeter. This thing is going to go here, which is an altimeter that I had set up off screen. Then we have the collective. This thing is going to go to the collective from the gyro. So that is going to be the up-down, because up-down controls the collective. Then we have the desired altitude. For this, ideally I would have a keypad, but I don't have those unlocked yet. So what I could use is a throttle. And a throttle then hooked up potentially to a digital display to tell me what the altitude or what the desired altitude is going to be. This cockpit though is currently consisting of a hell of a lot of glass. And I don't really have too many more good positions to actually put that. So I'm probably going to have to take out some of the glass just to have a couple more instrument panels. Let's see. How is this thing set up? Is this... Yep, that's correct. Now I'm going to go with a throttle. And I want a toggle. And I want a display. This display, I don't need to have any decimals. So this is going to be the desired altitude for the auto hold. Or the, let's say auto altitude maybe. This is going to be toggle, hold altitude. And this is going to be desired altitude. I don't want this to be to be 0 and 1. Because if I do it like this, I can only have a desired altitude of a maximum of 1, which would be a little low for a helicopter. So let's say a maximum desired hold altitude of, I'm going to go with 100. I don't want this thing to be too sensitive, because then if I push up, it's going to go and probably add 5 to 10 points. So I'm going to jump this back to 50%. And this output from the throttle then goes here. So that I now know what my desired altitude actually is. This thing also goes all the way back to the microcontroller. This one, desired altitude. The toggle, whether the whole system is on or off, goes back to this button. And that leaves me with one standard input, and that's going to be the collective. So what should the collective input be? And that came out of my seat, the up and down input. And with this, the system should work, provided that I actually give these things power. Since I'm doing a redesign of the cockpit anyway, I'm going to take off this part and add some more displays over here. Because I now also have an artificial horizon. And with that, I can see what sort of pitch my helicopter actually has. Something else that I have is another display. Or rather, I want to add another display. This is going to be my actual altitude. Altitude. It's going to draw that information from the altimeter that we have down here. And then I need to actually reinstall that artificial horizon. And these two blocks currently don't really have a job yet, I think. I could add a clock, although never found that to be too useful, but whatever. We'll just go with it. Okay, everything's hooked up. I think we're ready for a test run. Both to see if the new fuel tank system works, and to see if my new altitude system is going to work. You might find that initially it doesn't. Sometimes you just fuck up somewhere, and that's, well, what happens in Stormworks. So you gotta just adjust, see if it works, and test it out again. So the little bird, sorry, the big bird Mark II. Test 1. Into the seat. We did have wheels on this thing. I'm gonna go with the lights. I want the heater on. We're gonna drive this thing out of the hangar bay. Throttle up. Now I'm currently flying it manually. Or rather, I intend to. I'm gonna have to give it a little bit more throttle. Come on, you know you want to fly. I think something's wrong with the collective. Because at the moment it doesn't really want to seem to use that. So that's the up and down gyro. Desired altitude, collective. What's the seat set up as? Up, down. Is a sticky. This is the collective, so that should be working. What are the rotor blades like? Neutral, so that works. Neutral, so that works. Okay, so what am I missing? Did I do something wrong in the controller here? Numerical switch box. If it is on, take the value from the collective. Yeah, this should be working. Wheels on, light and heater. Currently using maximum throttle. There we go. Now we're airborne. I just did not give enough throttle. Okay, now it's time to use this new system, which apparently I still need to move a little because I can barely see it. My current altitude is already 80 meters. I want that to be, let's say, 60. Toggle the system. And the helo is now going to use the collective itself. We are dropping down to 60 meters and we're holding. Hands are off the controls. And rather, I can walk around in my helicopter now. How recommended is it that you do this at full speed? Not very. Because while it works, and while I could actually use, for example, a winch to lower myself down, the big question is how desirable is that? Answer might be not very. Anyway, I can also use this system to now just move forward, at which point I'm going to lose some altitude, and the PID should be correcting for that, because it's going to try and put me back up. Let's see, if I put this to 100... Yep, you can see that the PID is trying to bring me up to the desired altitude of 100. Okay, so this test is successful. The helicopter flies. The altitude hold kind of works. Whoa, 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 shit. That was close. Not exactly sure what was that. But, okay, we're airborne. So, this works. And now I can start to add additional equipment to the back of the helicopter. Not so much the winch where it is right now, because the helicopter as is was designed to be, well, something else rather. I'm just going to take this thing off of auto hover because I don't really trust it anymore. Though I might be able to cheat and just... Yep, there we go. We're back at the workshop. What else do I need to do? No, I'm going to save that for another episode. Next episode, I'm going to be removing this winch, and we're going to be making a hole in the bottom of the helicopter, from where we can lower and raise a winch with a harness and potentially even a stretcher, so that I can start to bring passengers on board this helicopter. Join me next time, as it's going to be another piece of redesign of the Big Bird. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it. If you want to use the helicopter yourself, I have put the version as is on the workshop, and you can find the link down below in the description. So if you want to tinker with this helicopter or copy the settings as I have them, by all means, go ahead. Have any questions? Let me know, and otherwise, I'll see you guys next week for the next video.